Use your mic.
I will, but I wasn't sure that it was on.
Okay.
So, we are your hosts. This is my esteemed colleague and friend, Nettie LaBelle-Hamer, and I am Bill Schnabel. We are both University of Alaska Fairbanks people. Before we get started, I want to say one thing, maybe two things, but there is no place that I'd rather be right now than in this room with you and with these storytellers. Tonight is a night about stories. It comes from, storytelling has been a tradition for as long as humans have been human. And tonight we're going to do that, and we're going to do it about energy, and we're really, really looking forward to it. Before we get started, a couple of things. First off, emergency exits. There is one right there. I can see daylight. If there's a fire alarm goes off, you can head out that door. Or there's emergency exits in the back, and there's doorways. You head out, you take a right, and you go outside. Second, restrooms. There are restrooms. If you go outside the auditorium and take a left and then take another hard left, there are restrooms over there. One more thing I'd like to say is thank you to our sponsors. This night would not have been possible without help from the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, without help from the Fairbanks North Star Borough, and the Office of Naval Research, Science, and Technology.
That is not on.
Sorry. Speaking of science and technology, we'll be turning on the monitor.
So I have the power. I turned it on. I'm
Excellent.
like, there you go. That's a PhD from UAF at work right there. Boom.
Yes. Because I was making that stuff
I
up
know,
before, and I'm
like,
lucky that those are the entities.
Yeah.
And, again, those are the sponsors, but it definitely would not have been possible without you. So thank you for being here. What are we doing tonight, Nettie?
Thank you for asking, Bill. So I want to kind of go over what it is that we're doing tonight for two reasons. First of all, it's a good idea for you to know what you're doing sitting in the seats. And second, because Gloria O'Neill could not come this evening, we have asked President Jim Johnson to come and speak. He's our first speaker, and I thought it'd be a good idea if we told him what we expected.
Does he know the rules?
No, not yet. So thank you for being fair game and showing up to do what you're not sure what we were going to ask of you. So here we go. We're going to give TED-like stories.
Rule number one.
With 3 rules. Always 3. Always 3. Rule number 1. You cannot exceed 18 minutes in your storytelling.
Were you aware of that, Jim? All right, this will be a challenge for you.
What do you mean?
I didn't just say that out loud.
You made me forget rule number 2. Rule number 2 is it has to be about energy. Did they tell you that?
However, energy is not just electrons. Energy can be however you define it. It can be energy of people, energy of education. It can be a lot of things that begin with E.
Education, for example.
Yes, or E-optimism.
E-optimism?
Rule number 3.
Work with me. So, rule number 3 is you cannot be boring.
What that means is this. Tonight is full contact storytelling. Full contact storytelling, meaning that the speaker needs to be engaged, but in order for this to work, humans have proven this over years and years and years, you have to be engaged.
Absolutely.
So we would like for you guys to do what you can to draw that story out of our speakers.
There will be opportunities, we'll just call them that, for you to participate in this evening's storytelling. And so I think we're ready to go forward. I think I'd like to bring up our first speaker, President Jim Johnson, the 14th president of the University of Alaska. And he's a very energetic person, so it fits our energy theme. I'm going to hand you this. And yes,
Thank you.
thank you. And I know that he expends his energy not only on campus, but also on long runs, and I think on a yoga mat occasionally.
Yeah, like at 5 o'clock this morning with one of my 3 Cardigan Corgi dogs. Harold really loves to get out on the trail for a couple miles. And then when I'm doing various poses, Harold likes to be right there doing his thing too. So I just want to begin by thanking you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the University of Alaska today and energy in particular. And as I listen to Bill especially, but Nettie also, I'm really glad there's academic freedom, you know? So, so here's, you should all be very pleased that unlike one of my 11 bosses here, Regent John Davies, I'm not a geophysicist because I would start way before 1862. I'm rather a political scientist, and so for me, the University of Alaska really began in 1862 when Abraham Lincoln signed the Morrill Act, which created land-grant universities all across the country at the time. And you got a few key dates here for Alaska's history, wrapping up in 1959. But in 1915, Alaska became a land-grant college. The story goes that Judge Wickersham at the time, there was this big law book. He was our territorial delegate back in Congress, and it was used as a doorstop in his office back in DC, and he tripped over it one time, and it fell open to the Morrill Act. Thought, wow, we could use a university here in Alaska because ultimately it was all about statehood. It's all about building a great university to build a great state, and I'll come back to that theme in just a little bit. But that's sort of the history here, and we are a land-grant university today. And I would note, and I'll emphasize this in just a moment, only one state got a smaller land grant than Alaska did. Here we are by far and away the largest state in the United States, and only Delaware got a smaller land grant than we did. And Connecticut got a bigger land grant than we did. And that's not in percentage terms, that's in real terms. Rhode Island, that huge state, got a bigger land grant than we did. And these are states that are so small you can't even write the name of the state in the state. You have to write it out in the Atlantic Ocean. Wally Carlo, how are you? Good to see you. So here we are from the north, and all of you are scientists and really into global politics and that sort of thing. And so I like this map a lot because it puts us in our northern context, less than in our context vis-a-vis the United States. But we are America's Arctic state, and we're really, really proud of that. Here's Alaska mapped onto the lower 48 states. And I love this picture because it shows several things. One is our huge size, but also it says that if we were a university system there across the United States, we'd have campuses in South Carolina and South Dakota, in Oklahoma. We would have a world-class NSF research station up in Wisconsin, and we'd have an NSF-owned, but we operate SHIP, the research vessel Sikuliak, operating somewhere off the coast of Montana. 1,342 miles from our Ketchikan campus to our Kotzebue campus. 15 campuses, 3 universities, 12 community colleges. Half of those are not accessible by land. They're insular. And we're the only state in the country where all of that is included in one university system. Whoops. We are on traditional Dene land. Trothieta is this hillside here. And this is a very, very important part of Alaska. And I think it's important also to note that we're not the first Alaskans at all. Alaskans have been here for over 10,000 years. And so this map is a nice one in my view because it gives us 2 pieces of important information. One is the language groups and where they're distributed across the state. So you have this 10,000+ year basis for language and culture in Alaska, but it also brings in the 1971 Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act jurisdictions and boundaries for the regional native corporations. I would note that 9 of the 10 of the top companies, private companies based in Alaska, are native-owned corporations, one of which Wally serves on the board of, Doi Unlimited. So Alaska's Arctic University, you're sitting on the campus of the world's #1 Arctic research university. And I love this, little bar chart here because over on the left there is the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And then you've got a slew of universities all across the world. And this counts the number of Arctic publications. So we lead the world in this field, critically important for the state and for our university. Students, we've got 30,000 students at our 15 campuses across Alaska. This chart is kind of nice because it shows the diversity of our students. I would note that about 60% of our students across the university system are part-time students. Over 50% take online courses all the time. And about 60% are female. And so, I mean, this is a busy chart, obviously, but you can get a sense of how diverse the University of Alaska is. I would note 15% of our students are Alaska Native. This past year, UAF commencement, 17% of our graduates were Alaska Native students. So that's something we really think is very, very important. We're really affordable. This bar chart here, the percent of average median income that is accounted for by tuition. And Alaska's over here with Wyoming. And in a chart here, just a moment, you'll see Alaska with Wyoming once again. But just 11% here. Pennsylvania looks like it wins the prize at 27%. So that would be the least affordable state for higher education in the country. And we're very, very low. And that's important to ensure access to higher education in the state. We've got just a few challenges in Alaska. Of course, our location is an advantage, but it's also a tremendous disadvantages in some senses. We have very high cost structures in Alaska, the highest healthcare costs in the country, high energy costs, especially in rural Alaska. Transportation, construction costs are high. On the economic front, we have the highest unemployment in the United States. Not something to be really proud of. Lowest growth in the country. So we've got some serious economic headwinds here in the state. The economy has been more diversified since the last time we had a recession, but we're still in a very tough spot. Land, here we are, the largest state by far in the United States. 88% of Alaska is either state land or federal land. And in terms of individual private property, it's 1% of Alaska. And then in education, we've got some challenges. And this boring chart summarizes the challenges in a way. If we had 100 average ninth graders in this room, in the US, if we applied those numbers, 83 would graduate from high school, 53 would go on to college, and 24 would complete college on time. In Alaska, only 76 would graduate from high school, only 33 would go on to college in Alaska or any place else in the United States, and only 9 of them will finish on time. So sometimes people talk to me about the brain drain in Alaska, and what they're referring to is the roughly half of the 33% there who go to Yale or Stanford or the University of Washington for college. And frankly, in my view, that's a trickle, 15, 16%. There is a gusher happening between the 100 who are average ninth graders in the state and the 33 who do not go on to college. That's 67%. That is a serious challenge for Alaska there, and that's one that we are facing up to at the university and working very closely with our colleagues in the K-12 system to deal with, but that's a serious challenge for Alaska. Ranking on the new economy metrics, pretty busy chart, hard to read, but you see all those green bars down there. Those, the bottom one, we rank 49th in industry investment and research and development. We rank 49th in manufacturer value added. We rank 48th in venture capital, 48th in export focus of manufacturing and services, 46th in patents, and on and on. So this is a challenge for us as well, and one, again, we're facing up to and committed to dealing with. This is an interesting little chart here. It correlates personal income per capita down on the x-axis and percent of, so it's educational attainment essentially on the y-axis. And you see here we are with Wyoming again, a high income, low education state. The correlation there is about 0.8. So roughly 80% of variance in income is a function of educational attainment. So that's a pretty strong factor or determinant, if you will. Correlation, though, is not just a cool procedure. Regression's not just a cool procedure, it's also a law. And so what keeps me up at night is not only that previous chart I showed you, but this graphic right here, because that says that Alaska will eventually it will regress to the mean. And the strategic question for Alaska long term is, are we going to regress to the mean at our current level of education attainment, which means our incomes will be much lower than they are today, right? We'll be moving to the left. Or do we regress to the mean by, best case, increasing educational attainment? And that will be how we maintain our incomes. So this is critically important for Alaska. Well, another challenge here, of course, is budget cuts. And we started in FY14 at $378 million from the state, and you see the decline there. This year we did better. So we actually got our first increase. You see the legislature, $327 million. That's this year. The cumulative hit over that period of time, though, from FY14 to FY19 is $196 million. Fewer dollars coming to the University of Alaska than would have come had we stayed at $378 million over that period of time. Headcount. The top line there is our staff, and then you come down to our adjunct faculty, regular faculty in blue, and student employees. We're down 1,200 faculty and staff across the UA system since FY14. 1,200 fewer people working here across the state today than 4 years ago. But let's not all be sad. We have a plan. It's been a difficult plan, no question about it, but we do, and we're working that plan. We have a strategic pathways template here. What this does is try to bring together the entire University of Alaska system. So on the upper part of this chart here is what is common among us all, our vision, our values, mission, strategy, etc. In the middle section here, you have the leadership role that each one of our 3 universities plays in the state, with as little redundancy as possible there, so that we actually benefit from the differences that our campuses bring to the state. So these are areas of statewide leadership. And then in the bottom of this table, it describes where we are common and where we collaborate with each other. So 230 faculty, staff, students from across the state, community people as well. Is that Brian Holst there? It is. He participated in this process to identify how we can restructure ourselves, organize ourselves to meet the state's huge higher education needs with a lot less money. And we made some tough decisions during that process and are moving forward with implementation of those decisions now. The Board of Regents last year approved these goals out to 2025. So this, in my view, is our sort of short term. I'll talk about a longer term thought here in just a moment. But we need to contribute to the state's economic development, right? We've got to drive the skilled workforce for the state. We want to continue to grow world-class research and increase degree attainment. And then if we can do all those things really, really well and keep our costs relatively low, or at least not increase them as fast as our revenues go up, we will be operating more cost effectively. You see some of the strategies we're looking at here to support these goals and the goals themselves. Some have said, Jim, these things are nuts. How do you expect to triple the percentage of Alaska-trained teachers hired each year? Well, by setting an ambitious goal and going after it. Today, only 30% of the new teachers hired in Alaska each year are from Alaska. 70% are imported each year, and they churn. And it costs a lot of money to bring those people in every single year. So we've made a commitment to triple that number and increase investment in our teacher education programs, even when our budgets were being reduced. Looking at economic development, increased investment in research, as well as the research goal as well. We're even though we were getting cut over the last several years, we cut deeper to invest in research so that hopefully as we come out of this recession and start growing again, we will have momentum and be moving forward to really meet the state's needs for higher education. Where is it there? 45,000 students. You see increasing enrollment from 29,000 to 45,000 students there. Wow, a 50% increase. If we go back to the table I showed you a little while ago compared to other states, that would be less than the national average, 45,000. So it's not a crazy ambitious goal. And in fact, in 1974, 6% of Alaskans were a student at one of our universities. Today it's 4%. Well, you do the math. If we're able to increase, we did it in 1975, we ought to be able to do it again today. So that is really a powerful focus for us. I think it was effective in generating support this year from the legislature. We got a $10 million bump from them, and we'll be talking with the Board of Regents on Thursday to get that budget approved. I have a great deal of confidence in the people of this university, in the researchers in particular, our faculty, students, staff, and community supporters. This is a picture, of course, of Denali. And it is on our seal, actually, back from 1917. So this is an important symbol for the University of Alaska and actually for all people here in Alaska. And I think it's going to be, I put this here because I think it's going to be a tough challenge, no question about it. But it'll be a critically important challenge. And I think this symbolizes the biggest mountain on the continent. And I think it symbolizes the role that Alaska can play in the United States. In terms of energy research, no question about that. But in terms of leading in understanding and advancing Indigenous studies, in understanding how to bring together a strong and sustainable economy, a natural resource economy that again is sustainable and can be the model so that when we look out at 2040, for example, not just 2025, but out to 2040, the world looks to us certainly for microgrid solutions and for how we bring all Alaskans to the game of advancing this state and its interests. Now, we certainly have some great challenges, no doubt about it. But for the thousands of years that Alaskans have lived in this tough but beautiful and rich country, there were values there, values of grit and determination and persistence and creativity and innovation. And so I think what we need to do here at the university is tap into those values and empower our people so that we can stand here in 2040 proud of the leadership role of the University of Alaska and the state of Alaska in our nation and in the world. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Can we have another round of applause, please, for the president of this university? Thank you. I really appreciate personally the optimism that the message comes. Optimism takes energy, I think.
It does indeed.
But you know what takes more energy? Pessimism. We don't want that. So one of the things I just learned from the president's talk is that Delaware actually got less than we did. So Delaware is our Mississippi. I'm pretty happy about that.
Huh.
All right, so
Yes.
we forgot something last time. Actually, Bill did. I totally remembered, but he forgot to say that we have 6 total speakers today. So President Johnson started us off.
And the plan is we're going to have 3 speakers in a row, and then we're going to have a 30-minute intermission, followed by 3 more speakers.
6.
And then we'll cap off the evening with some more full contact storytelling.
Yes.
So, Chris Rose is, you might know him as the executive director of the Renewable Energy Alaska Project, REAP, since 2004. What you do not know about him probably is that he is an educator, and he is an educator about things, cosmic things like the moon. He's a big fan of the moon. And Jim just talked about education. Well, Chris educated me before this very session, explaining this. Tonight is a full moon. And in the summertime, everyone in Fairbanks knows this. In the wintertime, the sun just comes over the horizon like that, right? Right around the solstice. Solstice.
Yeah, you got it.
In the summertime, on a full moon, the moon does the same thing.
What?
You can't really see it, but it just comes, the zenith is really, really low. And it's because the moon, well, maybe Chris will explain it. Anyway, Chris. Let's have a round of applause for Chris Rose, everybody.
Imagine a place that is so cold and full of radiation that unprotected you'd last for 1 or 2 minutes. A place where no life that we know of exists, a place that extends for trillions of miles. Now imagine that that place is just on the other side of these auditorium doors. That would concern me. Okay. This concerns me too.
Just to get our pictures up there, but we're going to get the slides reset and we're going to go again. There'll be more pictures like that during the show. Full contact storytelling, Chris. Come on, get with it.
Tell me when you're ready. All right. So outer space is not just on the other side of those doors, but it's closer than you think. The Kármán line, which astronomers use to define the boundary of outer space, is just 100 kilometers above our heads, 62 miles away. It's always minus 455 Fahrenheit up there, very cold. Imagine 225 Empire State Buildings end on end, and you are in outer space. But if you want to talk about that area of our atmosphere where we can live, where humans can survive, we're not talking 62 miles, we're talking 5 tops. At 29,029 feet, Mount Everest is the highest point in the world, and climbers cannot be up there without supplemental oxygen. There's a reason why climbers call anything above 26,000 feet the death zone. So we're really all just surface dwellers down here. Our entire civilization is down here. All of the plants and the animals that we rely on are down here. It's a very beautiful and irreplaceable place. And we're just a hair's breadth away from trillions and trillions of light years of cold, dark nothingness. So why do I care about our position in the cosmos? Well, it's because it gives me context that's really important, perspective, and inspiration. I have been the leader of the state's largest clean energy education and advocacy group for 14 years, and I believe renewable energy is important for a number of reasons. First of all, when you talk about energy efficiency, everyone wants to save money. Why waste anything? And this technology is moving so quickly that it's an exciting field to be in. Of course, when you have clean energy too, you have much more energy security and energy independence. But one of the things I'm very interested in is the risk that we're taking if we consider burning the rest of the fossil fuels that we have. I don't think climate change is really in dispute much with people in Alaska. We see it all the time. And I don't think most people in this room would dispute that what 97% of the world scientists tell us, which is that it's us emitting greenhouse gases from the combustion of coal and natural gas and oil that's putting us at risk. That's changing the temperature of the planet. Now, some people might say, well, this is just another natural cycle in the Earth's 4.5 billion year history. And it's true, the world has been hotter. Imagine 55 million years ago. No, I didn't think you could do that. I can't imagine 55 million years ago. 55 million years ago, the planet was 5 degrees centigrade hotter than it is now. And of course, we know what Paris is telling us is we can't go beyond 2 degrees centigrade. It was 5 degrees centigrade hotter than it is today, and the concentrations of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere were 3 to 4 times higher than they are today. Probably brought on by a lot of volcanic activity, methane hydrides bubbling out of the ocean, but it was a pretty rapid, by geological standards, warming. But still, it took thousands of years. We are on a much faster trajectory now. We're looking at least 1 degree centigrade every 100 years right now. And if we look at burning all the fossil fuels that we have at our disposal, we could get to 2,000 parts per million by 2250. That's 230 years away. So when we began to pollute our streams, our lakes, our waters, we started to realize these are common resources. We can't do that. We began to create rules that would stem the pollution. Now, that not stopped water pollution at all, but it certainly has curbed it quite a bit. Unfortunately, I don't think we're not at the point yet where we're looking at the atmosphere as a commons. It's relatively small. We all depend on it. And it's problematic because most of the emissions that we're talking about are invisible. We don't see them going up. And we as humans are quite small. The sky looks big to us. But I often wonder if we could visualize better just how small this atmosphere is, whether or not we wouldn't realize that it is a common resource. So 62 miles is also important to me for another reason. 62 miles is the distance between my little apartment in Anchorage, where I spend a couple nights a week, and my homestead and my garden in Sutton. And I'm keenly aware when I am driving those 62 miles between Anchorage and Sutton, that if I were driving straight up, I could get to outer space in an hour. 1 hour at 62 miles an hour. I go to my garden to get inspiration, to recharge, to get connected with the land. And it really gives me a lot of motivation to do the work that I do. And I would also say that the progress that clean energy is making gives me a huge amount of hope and motivation as well. This is a graph just showing the investment worldwide of clean energy over the last 10 years or so, and it is growing by leaps and bounds, as you can see. We are looking at a total industrial revolution in the way that we are changing the way that we use energy. We've got wind and solar dropping in price so quickly that it's competitive with fossil fuels. Alaska has all kinds of potential to add to the mix worldwide, particularly in the developing world with microgrids. And we're looking at a total disruption with the way that we transport ourselves. As lithium-ion batteries just get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, electric vehicles are going to get cheaper and cheaper. And people are soon going to realize if I can buy an electric car for the same price as an internal combustion car, but the electric car costs 1/3 the price to operate, I'm going to buy an electric car. And Bloomberg is now estimating that by year 2050, 55% of all the cars in the country will be electric vehicles. So am I scared? Am I scared that we're only 62 miles away from outer space? No, I think we will rise to the occasion. I think we will accelerate the way that we are expanding clean energy. But I also think it's really important to consider the little things we do in our lives, things that we can all do. When you plant a garden, you not only get healthy local food, you get exercise, you get an appreciation where food comes from. You're not going to waste it. You get a connection to the land. You start to realize that soil is a common resource, just like water and air. And when you're kind to strangers, you're not just helping that one other person, you're bringing everybody together. We're all earthlings. We're all humans. And I believe that we can do our best together, do our best for the young generation coming up. We all have that responsibility. And I also believe that if we stop fighting over ideology just for a minute, we would realize that our common cause for survival is fighting rapid climate change. So in English, there's this idiom, the sky is the limit. And the implication is the sky is unlimited, or that we've got unlimited possibilities. And I do believe we have unlimited possibilities with clean energy, with different ways of attacking the problem that we have in front of us. But the sky is limited. This is the aurora, floating 60, 70, 80 miles above the surface of the Earth. And I think if we have the perspective of where we actually are sitting in the cosmos, it helps us to understand just how much responsibility we have. Climate change is not a partisan issue. Climate change is a survival issue. We're all very vulnerable here as surface dwellers. And I believe that if we take a fresh look at our place in the cosmos, that could give us context and inspiration to protect the paper-thin shield that we have from infinity.
Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate that perspective. And I also, another optimistic speaker, I really appreciate the optimism and putting it into context for us. And Bill, what are you doing? Bill?
Full contact storytelling.
So when they asked us, actually they asked Bill to do this, and I'm just joined him. So when they asked Bill to do this, they said, we want entertainment, light, full song and dance. So apparently you took that very seriously, and we're going to have a song. But this is full contact storytelling. That means that you guys are going to sing with us.
So the thing is this. The speakers are speaking their hearts out tonight. They have worked on these things. These are fabulous speakers. And storytelling goes both ways. It's not just them, and it's you. But you haven't practiced a story. We have a solution for that. And our solution is we're going to sing a song and ask you to sing along with us. Now, it's a very easy line. All you have to say is, when life gives you lemons.
Try it. 1.
Yes! You were beautiful.
On my count. Try it on my count. 1, 2, 3. When life gives you lemons.
And what do you do at that point? Yes, yeah. I thought that I wrote that, but
Turns out.
Can you guys hear this? Okay, all right. Well, we'll try this. Okay, and you're gonna sing along, right? And Nettie's gonna tell you when to do it?
I'm going to tell you when.
Don't do it yet, Nettie.
No, okay.
Okay.
Not yet. You go.
All right, I gotta wait till it comes around. And if life gives you lemons, you can make lemonade. You just cut them in quarters with a serrated blade. You put the rinds in a mailbox for the mailman to take, and the seeds in a jar with the money you saved. Here we go. And if life gives you lemons,
When life gives you lemons.
life gives you lemons. And if life gives you lemons, you can make lemonade.
Make lemonade.
That was beautiful. All right, we're going to do 2 more verses.
Oh, thank God.
A little chance to practice up. Okay. And if life gives you chickens, You can make pot pie. Yeah, but don't pluck his feathers while he's still alive. And if life gives you goldfish and a new trampoline, I'll bounce him high up to heaven. It's something fish never see. And if life gives you lemons,
When life gives you lemons.
life gives you lemons.
When life gives you
And
lemons.
if a life gives you lemons,
When life gives you lemons.
you can make lemonade.
Make lemonade.
Nice. Okay, one more thing I want to ask of you. So you're talking to us, but what I think I'd like for you to do this time is when you say life gives you lemons, I think I want you to look at the people next to you and tell them what to do when life gives you lemons.
Be my partner.
Okay? So don't look at us when you sing. Look at that person sitting right next to you, right in the eye. And if life, 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 if life gives you headaches and you can't pay the rent, just find a good person with money to lend him pot pies and goldfish and fresh lemonade and those hubcaps with the shotgun holes that you made, and tell him life gave me lemons.
When life gives you lemons.
Life gave me
When
lemons.
life gives you
You
lemons.
tell him life gave me lemons.
When life gives you lemons.
So I made lemonade.
Make lemonade. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so they should be happy that they asked for a song and a dance and not a dog and pony show, because that would be way scarier.
'Cause we were ready for that,
We
too.
totally, we have dogs, but we couldn't find a horse, so
So
no dog and pony.
our next speaker, Clay Copeland, is the mayor of Cordova. But more than that, there's probably something that you do not know about him, is that he is obsessed, absolutely obsessed with household appliances. I heard the talk earlier in the day, and you're going to find out why. So, Clay.
So in 2008, peak oil prices reached $147 a barrel, and that triggered a global economic recession. That hit my hometown of Cordova particularly hard, fishing community. But being the resilient community that we are, we got together, all the organizations in the community, and we got together a crew, a Cordova Renewable Energy Working Group. And we looked at all the energy resources in our community, looked at all the energy needs in our community, and came up with a list of 150 things. And we peeled the top ones of priorities and said, these are the things that we can accomplish. And it was amazing how much we accomplished in such a short period of time. So as a manager of the electric utility, Cordova Electric Cooperative, my homework was to rebuild a hydroelectric project that had been damaged by a flood in 2006. But my other assignment was the one I was really passionate about. It was getting electric vehicles on the streets of Cordova. And this makes a lot of sense in Cordova because with a 15-mile radius for the whole community, commutes are pretty short. But even with that short drive, gasoline was so expensive that it actually competed with the monthly electric bill. So there was a good opportunity. But even beyond that, we had run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects that would spill excess hydroelectricity in the summertime during a runoff, and we'd spill it during winter storms. So it seemed that with a whole new generation of electric vehicles just starting to come to the market at that time, it was a no-brainer. Electric vehicles seemed like a great path to our future and a way for us to manage our energy waste and use our local resources better. So by day, I worked on the hydroelectric project, but at night, I would go home and assume my alter ego. I'd sneak into the closet, put on my mask, put on my cape, and become Energy Crusader, seeking out high energy use and conquering it where I could. So it turned out 60% of our monthly energy bill was our home heating fuel. And it turned out to be a pretty simple fix. I just got an on-demand hot water heater for our domestic hot water. And we got some cheap thermostats. I think they were $50 each at Costco to get some programmable thermostats. We'd turn the heat on for a few hours in the morning, turn it on for a few hours in the evening when we got back from work, and then we'd let it cool off the rest of the night. That cut our home heating bill in half. From $600 a month, we dropped to $300 a month with our home heating bill. So once I got that out of the way, I could really dig into the part that I was passionate about, and it was my own area of expertise, the electricity. It turned out our electricity use was about $20 a month, or 20% of our home energy use. And because we still had some fossil fuel use, some diesel fuel in the winter especially, electric bills had gone up quite a bit. So I started with the, as an electric utility engineer, one of the things I learned when I had to go out and investigate high bill complaints, every single time a high electric bill carried me on a path to somebody using it for heat, using electricity for heat. So that's what I went after in my own home. And I started on the cold side. And my wife was ecstatic when she saw our little canary yellow refrigerator leaving the house and getting replaced with a big double-sized, literally twice the size, stainless steel, but Energy Star rated refrigerator freezer. It cut our electric bill $10 a month. So then we started canning our fish and meat during the summer, cheap hydro in the summer, remember? And we put all that food in the pantry for the winter. Then I could go out in the shop and unplug 2 of my freezers. Electric bills are really high in the winter. They're 3 times as much as the summer because of the diesel fuel we use in the winter. And those freezers left a nice little hole in our 3-car garage that my wife could actually park her car in. So after the refrigeration was taken care of, the low-hanging fruit, the real low-hanging fruit, is lighting in Alaska. With our long, dark winter nights, a residential use of electricity, 1/3 of it is lighting. And in our case, in Cordova, it's expensive because of the diesel fuel. So we switched to compact fluorescents at first. They use 1/4 as much energy as incandescents. And then a couple, 3 years later, we converted everything to LEDs. They use just 1/10 as much energy. But you know, environment's important in Alaska, and we love light. So we grabbed most of the energy savings, but as I was replacing those LEDs, I was bumping up the lumens a little bit, so we actually have a much nicer, brighter house in the winter. Still saved $30 a month. The next one was another big fan with the boss, a new front-loading washer and dryer. So we saved a tiny little bit with the washer because it uses 1/3 less water. That runs my well pump less and my water softening system. But the real savings was in the dryer. Because dryers literally use electric heat to cook all the water out of the laundry. It's hard on your clothes, by the way. A front-loading dryer does what's efficient with electricity. It spins the water out of the clothes. So just a little bit of heat is needed to dry them out. So that pair saved us another $20 a month. Well, by this time, I was kind of running out of places to save energy. Not much heat left in the home. And so I started looking and looking, and I found that there was still a huge opportunity in the coffee pot. It turned out that the coffee pot was 10% of our remaining electricity use. That little burner on the bottom uses as much energy as all the rest of our house put together, even with our own well and water softening system. So leaving it on for a couple hours in the morning was chewing up a nice little 10% of our electric bill and scorching the crap out of our coffee. So when we stacked together all those savings, we started with 950 kilowatt hours of monthly use. We got that down to 550 kilowatt hours. And in the process, we got new appliances, no more freezer burn food, got a nice parking place out in the shop, and the coffee even tasted better. Happy me, happy wife, happy life. When we made our goal. That was my goal, to cut the energy use in half. So why is it that electric energy is so intensive and wasteful when we use it for heat? Well, it turns out that electric energy is mechanical energy. And when you produce electricity mechanically, it's very efficient. The water flowing down the rivers in Cordova, 90% of that gets converted to electricity in our hydro plant and gets sent down the lines to Cordova. When we take diesel fuel and pour it into a generator, only 30% of the energy in that fuel ends up being delivered as electricity. The rest gets pumped into the air as heat and pollution. So it turns out that it's important how we use energy as well. If you use mechanical energy for mechanical purposes, it's also very efficient. So use electricity to make things spin, pumps, fans, electric machinery, like electric vehicles. So it turns out that when we try to use mechanical energy to generate heat, what we're really doing is using a whole bunch of mechanical energy and consuming it all in friction, so there's none left to do any work. So you can take a couple of sticks and go into your house and try rubbing them together to warm a room. If you rub hard enough, you'll probably warm up quite a bit. It's not going to warm your room up very much, though. If you want to do that, you throw those sticks in your wood stove. Burn them there and let fossil fuels and thermal sources of energy do what they do most efficiently, and that's provide heat. 90% efficient. If you think back to my home heating upgrade, it would have been really cheap to go out and get some electric heaters. I mean, you can buy them off the shelf in the store for pennies and plug them into each room. Unfortunately, that's what we've been doing in some of our communities. But it would have tripled the amount of home heating bill that I had in the winter. For every gallon of fuel that I put into my boiler at home, I would have had to put 3 gallons of fuel into the generator, diesel generator at Cordova Electric, and ship that same amount of heat back to my house. So it's incredibly wasteful to use mechanical energy for heat. So if you leave with nothing else today, there's 2 important things that I really like you to remember. Electricity is mechanical heat. We have to understand it and use it as such. And when you use mechanical energy to spur motion, even LEDs and compact fluorescence at a molecular level are really about collisions. Not like incandescence where you're just heating up something enough that it gives off a glow. So we want to use mechanical energy for mechanical purposes. We want to use thermal energy to heat things. So back to electric vehicles. In 2008, when I started looking at them for Cordova, it wasn't a very good proposition. They're expensive. They had a limited range, didn't matter so much for us, but they weren't reliable. You don't want to ship them out to a rural community and have to fix them or warranty them, for heaven's sake. We needed charging infrastructure. Those were barriers, but none of them were deal breakers. The real problem was that they were heated with electricity. So half the energy that you were putting in your battery was needed just to defrost the things and to keep them warm as you're driving around the community. Only half the energy actually moves the vehicle around the road. So that was a deal breaker for us, and I had to kind of watch and wait. And then came the disruptors, Tesla and Nissan in particular. And every year they kept getting better with their models, and I watched until finally they came through with the heat exchangers that used the cold air outside, made it even colder, and returned it, and the heat went into your car. Uses just a little bit of electricity. So now electric vehicles were in reach for us. But they were already buying these in droves in the rest of the United States. I mean, they're fun, they're sporty, they're sleek, they're techy, and they're the clean path to the future, right? Are they? 68% of our electricity in this country is produced with fossil fuels, and that's where most of the electrical load growth is going to come from. So if we start burning mountains of fossil fuels to charge a whole huge fleet of electric vehicles at Swampust, it'll be a colossal mistake. And it's a mistake we've been making a lot over the last 300 years. It turns out that 300 years ago, most of our transportation was pretty sustainable. We'd use sails on sailboats for ocean travel and commerce. We'd use carts, people, horsepower, manpower for moving us and commerce around by land. We even had man-powered and horse-drawn screws that could pump water out of mines for industry, pump water into aqueducts to carry water to cities. And the heat was mostly coming from wood and coal to heat homes and businesses, to fire Bronze Ages, Iron Ages with the smelters. They had it kind of right 300 years ago. But then came the steam engine. Now all of a sudden we're taking thermal fuel and we're using it for motion, and it fueled an industrial revolution that rode on the back of fossil fuel. How can we break this cycle? We need some help. Who are we going to call? Anybody remember the Ghostbusters from the 1980s? Remember the one thing that they were never supposed to do with their weapons? Anybody? Don't cross the streams. I thought it was beams. I'll have to revise quickly here. Don't cross the streams, but that's what we started doing. We started using mechanical energy for heat. We started using thermal energy to try to produce motion and mechanical energy. And it leads us to a bad place. So in the western United States, we started building dams, mostly for water conservation, but with those dams came tons and tons, massive amounts of cheap electricity. So how do you sell a lot of electricity? Heat. So let's build a bunch of smelters. Let's fire up a bunch of electric boilers. Let's put home hot water heaters everywhere. Let's even incentivize it. Let's reward you. The more you use, the less we'll charge you for it. So why does it matter, though? I mean, it's still clean, renewable energy, right? Why not use it for all those things? Well, the problem is we don't have any renewable energy available for where it's needed and where it's efficient for the mechanical energy. We need that for the electric vehicles. The fossil fuel that we're using in the vehicles, we can use that for the heat. And why does that matter? Because fossil fuels are poisoning our air. It's like Chris said, it's poisoning our water. It's disrupting the very climate that we rely on for our survival. So why are electric cars good in Cordova? Why should everyone have one there? Well, it turns out my Chevy Equinox uses $2,800 worth of fuel a year, uses 700 gallons of gasoline. The Nissan Leaf that we have here uses only $1,400 of electricity with the diesel cost included. And if you take that 30% diesel we use in the winter mostly, that's only converts to 100 gallons of diesel fuel used by this compared to 700 for the Equinox. So half the transportation cost, 1/7 of the fossil fuel use, and the fuel's coming from our own resources, our own infrastructure in our own town, and it's reliable and it's there. So that makes a lot of sense in Cordova. But there's another big value stream there. We're just in the process of installing a 1 megawatt hour grid scale battery. It's going to cost us $1.5 million. Well, that would buy 35 Nissan Leafs, and those Leafs would have twice the storage of that grid scale battery. And with their new 2018 vehicle to grid capabilities, we could take that excess hydro that we're spilling through the air and give it to the customers on our grid. And if they would just give us a little back when we need some energy to avoid diesel, it would actually save everybody on their electric bill. Huge opportunity. Well, that's great for Cordova, but what does it do for the rest of the country? It turns out that there are two huge contributors to greenhouse gases: transportation, over 90% fossil fuels, and electricity production. As I said earlier, almost 70%. So if you just look at ground transportation, we use 182 billion gallons of fossil fuels a year for ground transportation. The tragedy is that less than 1% of the vehicles on the roads are electric vehicles. If we could just get to 50% electric vehicles, we could cut that number in half. We could save 90 billion gallons of fossil fuel every year. But to get it right, we have to take the next step. We can take $30 billion of those savings and use it to put that to buy the fossil fuels that we use for heat. And then we can displace all the fossil fuels that we're using for the electricity. That frees up the electricity so that we can use it for the electric cars. When you add the 60 billion savings from the transportation, take the 100. If you take the 60 billion that's left over from the initial savings, and then the 90 billion that you save when you start using the fossil fuels for heat, you end up with 150 billion gallons of fossil fuel savings. The numbers are staggering. That's 460 gallons per man, woman, and child in the United States. The equation is pretty simple here. Don't use electricity for heat. Don't use thermal energy to produce motion, and we end up with a green planet. I'm going to buy myself an electric vehicle. It makes all kinds of economic sense in Cordova. But why should every vehicle in America be electric? Because it'll help preserve our limited resources, and it might just save our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. So, let's have a round of applause for our first three speakers from the first act. Now.
Oh, now.
So,
Sorry, I was still thinking about the last speaker. That was a really compelling presentation. I loved it. Again, with the optimism. I'm a sucker for optimistic messages. And Cordova, by the way, is one of the most beautiful places on earth. So I really appreciated what you had to say. And I forgot what I was supposed to say. So there you go. It's off to you, Bill.
well, that picture, Clay's final picture of the green planet got me thinking that perhaps it's time for, before we go
Okay.
to
Wait,
intermission.
I remember what I was supposed to say now.
Okay,
I
okay.
remember. I
All right,
remember.
go ahead.
Okay.
I was going, but
Thank you. You were doing good. But I remember now. We're going to go to an intermission. But before we let you go, have some food and drink out in the, we're going to call it a lobby. We have some homework that Bill is now going to explain. See, I remembered.
Green Planet got me thinking. You know, it is time for our haiku moment. Now, I'm not sure if you know what a haiku moment is, but here's how it works. So most people did haiku in grade school. I had to look it up on Wikipedia before tonight just to figure.
Wait. You told me you won an award for writing haikus.
Oh, here's the thing about that.
Oh,
I looked this up on Wikipedia as well. A haiku that's clever or pun-like and is not about nature is not haiku. In fact, it's called something like senru, or the haiku masters do not accept my work as haiku. Anyway, the point being that the haiku moment is that moment when you observe something in nature, but before you have time to really think about it. That's why they're so short. It's boom, it's that moment before you can really put it into words. But this is full contact storytelling. And so what we are asking of you is that each of you contribute a haiku to us by the end of intermission. So,
it is a time test.
if you need to recall what a haiku is, it's 3-line poem, does not have to rhyme. 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. For example, this is based upon the first 2 speakers. Ensure survival. 62-mile paper. Replace your old fridge. See? Like that.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay,
the second line's
okay.
supposed to be
Mira,
7 syllables.
Mira, you are in
wait,
the
wait.
second half.
62
No.
Mile is 2 syllables.
Mile.
I called mile.
Mile.
In Indiana, it's mile.
She's
See, so in the South, my mom would say mile. But in Indiana, where I grew up, it's mile. But
nice save, Bill.
Thank you.
So on your way out, wait, where is she? There she is. There.
and,
On your, sorry, he's got me laughing now. So on your way out, there are slips of paper with instructions and a place for you to enter. You can enter more than one haiku, but we need at least one. Will be collected, and we want them to be completed before the end of intermission.
yes, so when you come back in after intermission, and you get more points, though we're not really counting points, if you're able to use these words pulled from the playbill in your haiku. And as it turns out, the person passing out the papers and collecting, her name is Heike.
Yes.
So she's the perfect person for this. So 30 minutes, you can go out, grab a beer, have something to eat.
So
It is now-
Heike, wave so people can see who you're talking about.
Heike,
That's
haiku,
Heike.
Heike.
Heike, the haikus are the paper. The Heike is the person, just to be clear.
We'll be reading a few of them later. It is now 7:13. So at
Do the
30
math.
minutes from then is when's
Okay, we're going to say quarter till because we're
at
going to be
quarter
sloppy.
till at quarter till 8. We would like you back in this room. Haikus in hand. We don't want
No. Heike will have the haikus.
Heike will have the haikus. We won't be writing haikus during the speeches, during the talks next act.
Correct.
Okay? Okay, so let's intermiss.
Test. Z, my favorite part. Test. So we're going to get started again. I think that not everybody made it back in yet, but I have the mic, and therefore we're going to start. Just saying.
So long as you're ready to give up the mic when it's time.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. So that was my son's one job, by the way, at my daughter's wedding. I gave him one job at the reception. I said, when mom picks up the mic and starts telling stories, your job is to take the mic away from me. So he said that he sat there and he was laughing and laughing. And I knew the moment that he remembered his job because he's laughing, laughing, all of a sudden he's like, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to take the mic away. I'm like, yeah, take the mic away. But not tonight. So I think we're ready to get going.
Yeah, we are. Quickly, show of hands. How many people actually wrote a haiku? And you can lie if you want to.
Yes, lying
All right,
is it.
raise
Yeah, there
your
you
hand
go.
if you
There you
wrote
go.
a haiku. Did you give the haiku to Haiku Haika? Haika?
Yes, because
your
it is
hand.
time for pencils down. This is a time test and the time is over. Done.
And if you wrote a haiku, yes, please give it to Haika. Haika, do you have a handful of haikus? Excellent.
Check.
We'll be talking. You'll be coming up on stage later on.
Oh, I didn't tell her that bit. Okay, so yay.
So, again, welcome back. Full contact storytelling. You've written haikus, you've sung songs. There's more to come the second half of the show. But we're glad you're here. So, our next speaker, she probably doesn't even know this, but we have a lot in common. Mira Kohler grew up in India. I grew up in Indiana.
Practically the same thing.
Mira Kohler chose Alaska as her home. I chose Alaska as my home. Mira Kohler, the CEO of the Alaska Village Electric Cooperative. Me, I am a member of an electric cooperative. And Mira has a wonderful, wonderful story to tell. I heard it earlier tonight. So, without further ado, welcome back, and let's welcome Mira Kohler to the stage.
All right. Here's your clicker.
I don't have a slideshow.
No slides. So I'm just going to put this here then. And you're good.
And I don't have a slideshow, so all you have to look at is me. So when I was 21 years old, I fell in love with a Peace Corps volunteer. He was an Alaskan, he was a fisheries biologist, and he was stationed in India in the great desert of Rajasthan on the shores of a little reservoir in a tiny village. And he had built a fish farm there. And he was teaching the local villagers how to raise fish, carp actually, as a food fish and as a source of income. So I just thought that was so quixotic and so unique that somebody would give away 2.5 years of their life to better the fortunes of a small group of people in India, that I was captivated. So later in our acquaintanceship, when he convinced me that I really needed to come to Alaska, I did. So I came to Alaska in early March of 1976. It was very cold in Alaska, and I had never even seen an ice cube outside of the refrigerator, so it was quite alien to me. So that afternoon, it started to snow very lightly, and his mother whipped out a little piece of black velvet and a magnifying glass, and I got to look at my first snowflake under a magnifying glass. It was magic. So, of course, I decided that I couldn't go back after that, and we got married. So, and then we had our honeymoon, and, a few weeks later, but imagine this. We got to spend the summer in a tiny log cabin on the Kenai Peninsula at the bottom end of the lower Russian Lake. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but there's a fish and game station there. And they operate a weir that counts all the Russian River kings and sockeye that are going upstream to spawn. We got to do that summer. So it was my first time. I actually wore a gun on my hip because there was so many bears around, and got very good at hiking up and down the Russian River Trail with 3 fish in each hand. I mean, I was pretty strapping 42 years ago. So after the summer was over, we relocated to Cordova. Cordova is, I lived there 14 years, so I can say this. Cordova is a little drinking community with a bit of a fishing problem. It's also, by the way, the place where a phrase was coined that some of you may be familiar with. When an Alaskan lady was asked about the odds of, in Alaska, she coined the phrase, well, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. So, Alaska is well known for the male-female ratio issue. So anyway, I lived in Cordova for the next 14 years. And that next winter of 1977 was a particularly harsh winter in Cordova. It was also the winter that the local electric utility, which was a municipal utility, was having severe financial problems. And the bottom line was they weren't charging enough for their electricity, so they weren't collecting enough money to pay the bills. So the creditors got a little miffed about that, and pretty soon they cut off credit. So when their two largest generators failed, they had no resources to bring them back online. So we were in a rolling blackout situation. It was 6 hours a day of electricity in Cordova in December of 1977, which was a particularly cold December. And I remember it vividly because I had joined a food co-op, and we had a van load of groceries come up that month. And I was in charge of sorting the order for all of the members of our co-op. And it was so cold that the glass jars and bottles were all popping around me. So you had, apples here and grapefruit juice there and, mayonnaise going off in that direction. It was really quite interesting. It was frostbite time. So what happened as a result of that period of darkness, as it were, is that the town got together and decided we need to do something different. And so they put together a task force, and that task force decided that they were going to form a co-op. So they were going to form an electric cooperative, and the municipality was delighted to get the utility off their hands. And it opened its doors as a cooperative about 9 months later in September of '78. Fast forward a few months, February of 1979, I was imbibing an adult beverage or two. Remember I talked about the little fishing problem in the drinking village? With a local couple. They owned a radio station there. The radio station was called KLAM. For those of you that don't know, Cordova at one time was the razor clam capital of the world. And so I think that's what KLAM was named after. So the wife, Marie, was running the radio station while the husband, Doug, was running the new cooperative, the electric cooperative. So Marie was trying to convince me that I needed to go to work for her as the daytime radio announcer. And Doug was trying to convince me that I needed to go to work for him as their first bookkeeper. Her job started at 5:30 in the morning. His started at 8 o'clock in the morning. No brainer, right? So that's how I entered the electric utility industry. It's not like it was destined or anything, or that I thought that, when I grow up, I'm going to be an electric utility manager. No, that never crossed my mind. So I entered the electric utility industry. So why a cooperative? I have to tell you a little bit about the history of the cooperative, the electric cooperative in America. You've got to go back to the Industrial Revolution, 100 plus years ago. Electric utilities were being spawned to serve the large communities, the towns, the cities, the industrial area, because there was a lot of money to be made in electrifying people. But there was no money to be made in electrifying rural America. There just was no return on the investment. So at the time of the Great Depression, when the New Deal was enacted, which was FDR's way, of course, of trying to accelerate recovery from the Depression, one of the elements of the New Deal was the establishment of the Rural Electrification Administration, the REA. So the REA existed for the purpose of enabling local rural communities to band together as a group and to form a cooperative. And the REA established the rules as to how to operate a business electric cooperative, and it loaned them very low interest money and gave them the know-how to build electric lines to serve themselves. So back in 1935, when the New Deal was spawned, about 10% of America's farms had electricity. 20 years later, 100% of America's farms had electricity. So it was really one of the most effective pieces of legislation I think that was ever passed. going to Alaska. So Alaska did not become a state until 1959. By then, all the federal investment in hydropower plants and transmission systems and roads was already passed, and we did not get to participate in that. So Alaska, as a result, has very limited infrastructure. And that's the way it has always been. But we continue to manage with that. Alaska got its first cooperative, electric cooperative, in 1941. That was Matanuska Electric Association. You may recall that the pioneers were sent up here by the federal government to settle the land and to build farming communities. And they brought the concept of the electric cooperative with them when they came. And they formed Matanuska Electric to bring themselves electricity, sort of set a pattern for the state. And shortly after, actually Kodiak was the next one to be formed, very shortly after Matanuska Electric. Then I believe came Homer Electric, Golden Valley Electric, Chugach Electric, Naknek Electric. So Alaska is a cooperative state, actually. I think about 70% of Alaskans receive their power from an electric co-op. It is a wonderful business model. However, during this entire time, Village Alaska had no electricity. There literally was not a village. When I talk about a village, I'm talking about a sub 1,000 population that had central station electricity. So the governor at the time in 1967 was Wally Hickel, and he was brought the issue of we have to get power to the villages. They will never have any economic development unless they have power. So he formed a task force, and they're familiar names to many of you. Morris Thompson was one on that task force. Willie Hensley was another. Diane Carpenter. I mean, these are names that are familiar to all of us. And they got together and talked about how they were going to achieve the impossible, electrify Village Alaska. And they decided that they were going to pursue the cooperative model. The REA came along a little reluctantly because they did not know of a concept where you could have communities that were not connected to each other electrically or by road, all served by one utility. But they went ahead with the experiment, and we were born. So we were incorporated in late 1967, and we actually energized our first 3 villages in 1968, one of them even on Christmas Day. So it was just marvelous. I have to tell you that before we were there, I don't know how many of you have seen one of these. This is a seal oil lamp. It's made from walrus ivory. This is a very old piece. Doesn't belong to me, darn it. I wish I had. This was mine. But this is what they used to light the evenings in their homes. This is how kids studied for school. They wanted electricity in the worst way. So we started to energize rural Alaska. And actually the reason why most villages in the state have municipalities now, third-class municipals, is because AVEC insisted that in order for them to be considered as a member village, they had to have a local governing body, a formal municipal organization. And so they formed municipalities. So we are now in 58 communities. We have our furthest north to our furthest south community is 800 miles, 824 actually. Farthest west is Gamble, farthest east is Yakutat, so that's over 1,000 miles. And all of them are served from Anchorage. So all of the administrative and technical support comes out of Anchorage. And it actually works quite well. We have been able to develop within the organization some pretty high-powered technical skills. We have several engineers in our employ. We have top-notch technical resources, and we do not hesitate to rob the contractors of their top people whenever we need more help. So, that's part of the game. And we provide that service. So we actually are diesel dependent because it's the only technology that's very well known across the world. It's easy to maintain. But we have launched into wind. We've been building wind systems actually since 2000. The first one was a hybrid system that we worked with Kotzebue Electric on, but we've been building our own wind system since 2003. So we actually have 11 wind farms that serve 15 communities. And we achieve pretty unprecedented penetration levels with our wind systems. We displace as much as 40% of the diesel burned that used to be burned for electricity in our communities in good wind regimes. And we do that using our own in-house developed dispatch technology. But what we're aiming for is a much higher penetration level. And we are going to do that by collaborating with the national labs, with the division, the Office of Naval Research, with Alaska Center for Energy and Power, and others, to build a proprietary system that's going to allow us to be able to displace as much as 60% of our diesel fuel with wind energy. We're going to ultra-high penetration wind. We're putting in a 900 kilowatt machine in St. Mary's that is going to serve 2 villages with an average load of 500 kilowatts with a wind machine of 900 kilowatts. And we think that we can really get to these stratospheric levels with that technology. So as cooperatives, we are empowered to go beyond the bubble, as it were, because we exist to serve our members. That is our only motivation, is to deliver good quality service to our members. That is the difference in the business model of an electric cooperative versus a municipal utility or an investor-owned utility. We are motivated by much different pushers, as it were. And we know that our communities believe that their best bet moving forward is less dependence upon fossil fuels. And we are heading in that direction with all of your help. And I invite you all to join me on the journey. Thank you. That way.
Thank you. Mira Kohler, everybody. Round of applause for Mira. You know what? Yes, please. What struck me about that? I mean, so earlier, before the break, we were talking about, Clay was talking about some of the things we can do in our homes and, you know, as individuals to solve our energy issues. But what struck me about your talk, Mira, is the power, is meeting challenges through the power of cooperation. So now we're scaling up a little bit. Gosh, we have big problems, but the way to get at it is together.
Agreed. And you guys, honestly, when I was listening to you speak, I was thinking, you guys are practically twins separated at birth. I mean, come on. India, Indiana, it's the same thing. But I would like to introduce you to, oh wait, I'm supposed to do something else first.
Yes, Heike Merkel. Stand up,
Thank
please.
you.
Heike, please come up here.
Come on up here.
You have all
Heike,
contributed
come
to this
on
night as well.
down.
Come on down, Heike Merkel.
I was so excited to introduce the next speaker.
Yes,
I forgot.
Heike Merkel.
Hi.
Yes.
We did not tell her. We didn't tell her.
Summary. So we got 35 haikus from all of you.
What?
And are we going to read them all?
No.
Okay.
I was told to pick 3.
Yes.
And I violated that rule and I picked 4 because I couldn't pick 3.
Okay, well, you
Since you
fit right
guys
in
get-
with us up here because we violate every rule.
Okay. I think,
Oh, and there's another problem. So nobody put their name on these. And so when we read your haiku, maybe you can raise your hand.
okay.
Okay.
So Heike's, we're going to call this Heike's rule. If this is your haiku, I want you to raise your hand. Okay, since there's a, Heike, would you like to read the first one?
Mechanical Sun, 62 clean microgrids, Alaskan futures.
Nice. Whoa, yeah, nice job.
Prices?
Well, there's the prize of getting your thing read
Good
on,
job.
from the
Yeah,
stage.
yeah. A hearty round of
And
applause.
we are going to publish these if that's okay. Okay, then the second one. Ultimate Future. Local Fairbanks Diesel. No host whiskey bar.
All right, whose is that?
Who's the no host whiskey bar? Anybody gonna cop to that one?
Oh, they're
It's probably someone
probably
under 21.
at the bar. No solar, no wind. Old diesel infrastructure, your mom's microgrid.
Yes. brought your mother into it. Who's gonna put?
Who's gonna?
Oh,
Oh yeah, nice
Checkered
job.
shirt,
Not-
sir. And finally, Heike Merkel, please read for us the final haiku of the evening.
Sun's back, plants booming, frantically store energy. Winter is coming.
Woo! Winter is coming.
A Game of Thrones
Game of
reference.
Thrones reference.
That
You
is
got-
my wife, Cheryl Agnew Schnabel,
I think
the
that would-
beautiful woman over there. I had nothing to do with the selection.
Yeah, here you go.
Thank you, Heike
Thank you
Merkel.
very much. So, as I was saying before, I remember what I was supposed to do. I would like to introduce Ethan, who I would like to say is my brother from another mother, because I have a lot of friends with your same last name, and I'm just convinced that we are related. You have spent a lot of time with youth hockey. I've spent almost all my money on youth hockey. So
we share that for
we sure that, yeah, that ain't no cheap sport.
Can I just say, I broke my ankle
Oh yeah.
on hockey.
No,
So we'll discuss that.
I think I
Discuss.
broke my back on it last night. I wrote a haiku. I couldn't resist, right? I thought it was rules. It goes with some of the themes we've already heard just now. Diesel cocktail drunk. Bad home budget hangover. ASAP, rescue us. So, in preparing for this, my speech coach, who's in the audience but will remain unnamed, gave me some sage advice. If you're unprepared and get stumped, tell lies. If that doesn't work, tell damn lies. If you're still stumped, make sure that they have a pretty headshot that makes you look like an expert. And if you really need a moment to break the glass, emergency, pull out the glasses for the professorial look. So with that, we'll start off by talking about hockey. I did not coordinate with these people, but we'll start with hockey. So it turns out about 10 or 15 years ago, USA Hockey figured out that they have a problem. We weren't making very many NHL quality players, and we lost all the time at the international level of competition. So they took a route that might be viewed as unconventional and unexpected for a governing body of a national sport, especially hockey, and they did research. They sent people all over the world to figure out what the other national programs did to make their players better. And what they found out some very surprising things. So if you watch the Olympics or if you watch the international competitions, you'll see that Finland has a very competitive hockey team. And if you look at Finland, I didn't look it up, but going back to the damn lies part, I think I jumped over the lies. So straight to the damn lies, I'll make up a fact. Finland only has a population of something like 7 million people. And yet, at every level of play, there are Finnish raised and trained hockey players. And if you go to the Olympics, you better hope you don't play Finland because you never know. So what do they do in places like Finland and other places? This is what USA Hockey went to find out, because we're just not making enough players. Canada, it's easy, it's the national sport. Canada has 25 million people, 23 million of them play hockey. You know, if every pyramid, if the base is big enough, you're going to get some really good people up at the top, right? So Canada's got an easy answer. Everybody else, it's harder. So we went to study this. And one of the things that USA Hockey did actually find out was that at the very young ages, what we would call mite hockey in the U.S., 8 and under, the game just didn't fit the player. The scale was wrong. And the scale had an impact on player development. It chased off a lot of players. The better skaters, the better players were touching the puck all the time, and everybody else just chasing around. After a while, they get tired. They just watch. It's not any fun. They leave the game. On the other end of the talent spectrum, the best players, they get the puck, they make one move, and it's breakaway hockey all the way to the other end of a 200-foot rink.
So USA Hockey did something that was viewed as radical in North America, and there's still a couple of states that refuse to do this, but they changed the game. They scaled the game to the player. And what they did was they went either cross ice or half ice, and they made the nets smaller. There was a lot of resistance to this radical idea of rescaling the game to fit the player. And so USA Hockey went on a road show with representatives from Colorado Springs and Minnesota, the two places where all the USA Hockey types live. And they made promotional videos, and one of the ones that they still show in the coaching education seminars to this day is a video where they scaled up the game for adults to be proportional to the game for an 8-year-old. So when you scale up a rink to be proportional to what a regulation rink looks like to an 8-year-old, the rink becomes something like 400 feet long. And I'm an old goalie, and so these goal proportions, which are kind of programmed into my muscle memory, regulation goal is 6 feet wide, 4 feet high. You scale that up, and all of a sudden, an adult can't even reach the crossbar and certainly can't cover the whole net. It looks like a soccer goal. And so in doing this rescaling of the game, USA Hockey has actually begun to catch up to the other nations in the development of youth hockey players by growing the number of kids who stay in the game and by increasing the number of puck touches, and puck touches turns out to be the key metric. So why am I talking about hockey after jumping over lies and straight into damn lies? This message is all about scale. So we're here talking about energy, and I'm going to talk about two radical things, and I'm going to contradict half of what Clay said earlier, so I hope he's still around. But I'm going to talk about a couple of things, and one of them is scale. And the other is addressing the core problem. So there's some recent study and data in Alaska specific, and it evaluated the domestic use of energy. And all of this, when I talk about home budgets and everything, is going to be scaled on energy units and not on dollars. So don't confuse dollars with energy units like MMBTUs or BTUs. In this, if I slip up and use home budget or something as a shorthand, I mean in energy units, because it kind of normalizes everything across the system, where things cost vastly different amount depending on how many times and how far you have to haul your fuel. So in Alaska, in rural Alaska, this may not surprise you, but in rural Alaska, in a residential household, 90% of your energy use in many parts of the state is for space heating or domestic hot water, and 10% is for electric use. So we've done a lot of investment in Alaska in renewable energy, and a big focus on renewable energy. And in doing that, we're really only focusing on 10% of the problem. You can make enormous gains on 10% of the problem and still have 95% of the problem in front of you. So my radical proposal for energy is that the most important energy technology is actually sitting out there behind the sled, and that's the blue board insulation. And why blue board insulation? Well, because it's durable and it is water resistant, if not water repellent. And it solves the core problem, which is it addresses the thermal envelope of a house or a building, which is 90% of your problem. Now, as you sit here, we're talking about the rail belt. So here's a counterintuitive thing that's in the data. We actually spend more of our home energy budget on space heating and domestic hot water in the rail belt than they do in most of rural Alaska. How is that possible? Bigger houses, right? So this very radical technology that's sitting out there in the atrium is just as applicable here in the rail belt as it is in rural Alaska. So the first technology I'm talking about is insulate everything. That's a theme. Insulate everything. Insulation is cheap. It's easy to install. It can be installed without much technical skill. It's durable, portable, and it addresses 90% of the problem. Who was living here in the interior in 2007 and 2008? We think of those as the Palin years, right? No. We think of those as the, I don't want to see this sourdough fuel truck pull into my driveway years. Because as necessary as the sourdough fuel truck is, and as convenient as their autofill program was and presumably still is, when those guys rolled up, it was like putting another mortgage payment in the mail. Because at that point, oil was somewhere in the $140, $150 a barrel range. That bleeds right down into the cost of your fuel oil number 2 that gets delivered into your tank. So the Blue Board installation is a critical energy technology and one that's, I think, grossly ignored in our energy problem, in particular in rural Alaska. And the problem there is I think we focus on we can build a better house. Yes, we absolutely can build a better house. Cold Climate Housing Research Center has some wonderful designs. They are long-term, very efficient, very durable, very built for a purpose. The problem with those is building those in remote rural communities costs something like, let's call it $400,000 or $450,000 per unit. We don't have that kind of a budget to rebuild rural Alaska at $450,000 a unit. But we can skin a lot of very poorly built, very poorly designed houses in rural Alaska with Blue Board insulation and address our 90% problem. So that's the first thing. Let's insulate everything. Second thing, and this is the part that's contrary to what Clay says, and this goes back to our theme of scale, is let's electrify everything. So the title to my talk is The Magic Formula, and this is the magic formula. I was trying to think about things to talk about tonight. There's a scale problem in the energy situation in rural Alaska. It's entirely dependent on diesel for all practical purposes, and we focus on renewables. And one of the primary renewables and the renewable technology that's commercially developed, commercially deployed, commercially supported is wind. But wind has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And the villages have stayed the same, if not shrunk a little in most cases. So you have a scale problem. It's like the 8-year-old skating around on a 200-foot by 80-foot hockey rink, getting tired of fighting the battle that can't be won. You have a 200, let's call it a 200 kilowatt system in a village in rural Alaska. Most of the turbines at this point that are commercially deployed, commercially supported by the big companies like Siemens and GE are on the order of 2 megawatts. That's 10 times. It's an order of magnitude too big versus your peak load. So my aha moment in looking at all of this data and trying to figure out what salient point that jumps over damn lies into, oh, you're something of an expert, your headshot proves it. The formula is when 90% of your energy is being spent on space heat, if you can aggregate the space heat, the thermal load, onto your native electric load, all of a sudden you've expanded your load by a factor of 9. Now, if you can add some integration and other technologies, like thermal storage in the community water system, water and wastewater system, to where you can integrate at peak output, because wind turbines are often only producing net capacity factor in the low 30s, that's another factor of 3. So the magic formula is that you can take your native load, your electric load in a village, and you can multiply it by a factor of 9, by a factor of 3, and you have grown your theoretical maximum for the equipment you can install by a factor of 27. So now 200 kilowatts, which is 0.2 megawatts, becomes close to a 5 megawatt load that's theoretically capable of being served. So you electrify everything. I understand exactly what Clay was talking about earlier, that doesn't work in all applications, but in many rural villages where your options are diesel, the status quo, or doing something, I maintain that you electrify everything, aggregate all the load, get it into a place where the technology that's available fits the load of that particular location. And there's one final thing that wraps this back to the hockey theme, and that's the quote that's attributed to Wayne Gretzky, which is when they ask him, "Why are you so good?" And he says, "I always skate to where the puck is going to be. Good players skate to where the puck is. I always skate to where the puck is going to be." And in energy, the puck is going to electrification, electric cars, better electric batteries, electric storage, better inverters, new technologies, including a variety of the heat pumps, air source heat pumps, water source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, which are mechanical means of converting heat differential from one location and using it to create usable space and space heat in another. So my radical proposals for rural Alaska, especially, but also here in the Rail Belt, really: insulate everything, electrify everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. You should turn the haiku in. So I really appreciated that. Being a hockey mom / hockey player, I totally understand the scale of things because I did all of my practices and most of my games at the Patty Center, and then we would occasionally have games at the Carlson Center. Yeah, that's a much bigger piece of ice. I'm going to tell you that if the first 2 periods you're okay, and by the 3rd period you're like, this is a much bigger piece of ice. It's exhausting.
Been there.
Yes.
So, you know, one thing that struck me when Ethan was talking was, you know, he kind of was talking about some of the differences that his points were a little bit different than Clay's, and it struck me that, you know what, this is a conversation. I mean, we are not going to solve our challenges by having one person going in one direction. We actually need to speak and listen to each other.
What? Sorry.
And learn from each other.
Yes.
And dance with each other, so to speak.
What? Okay, so we gave you a song. We told you we were going to give you a song and dance, and so far we have sung. We've written poetry. So
Full
now,
contact storytelling.
absolutely. So would all the people in the audience who have served in one of the armed forces or has in the family of someone who's served in the armed forces please stand? Come on, I know you're out there. Thank you for your service. Thank you very much. My dad also served in the Air Force. Don't sit down. I see you. Don't sit down. Don't leave them standing by themselves, people. Stand up. Everybody up. Up we go.
So we have, there's one more talk tonight, but and you guys have given a lot, but you need to give more.
Yes.
Because our speakers gave more.
So what I was explaining to Bill earlier today is that I said, I think this is a direct quote, that I can teach anyone how to merengue. Anyone. So I had our armed forces folks and families of the armed forces first stand up first because you have a little bit of an advantage because you've been doing a lot of marching in your lives, and that's where we're going to start. So we're going to start with the march. Come on, let's see it. Can we have some music, please? A little louder. This is the march, and you just add the hips. One step for every beat. Step on the beat.
I have a broken ankle.
Yeah, so you say. And you can take it for a walk.
Okay.
That's a merengue. It's just a fancy march.
Yeah. You guys are giving it up.
All right. All right. Song and a dance.
That will make the film.
Yeah, I'm never watching that film. So our next speaker, they say you cannot create nor destroy energy, but I think that Gwen has actually created energy in the state of Alaska and at UAF with her Alaska Center for Energy and Power. We're very proud of Gwen Holdman. What?
I thought I got to introduce Gwen.
We talked about this.
All right.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Gwen is the most competitive person I have ever met in my life. I showed up to work a month ago in a cast with a broken ankle. The next day, Gwen shows up with a broken ankle.
Yeah. Broken ankle. Yeah.
I challenged her, no, she challenged me to a game of wiffle ball. Okay, her unit versus my unit. I show up with my unit. She went out and hired interns. She hired college baseball players to come and be interns. We actually won the wiffle ball game. She claimed to have won the wiffle ball game and handed me a loser's trophy, demands that I show it in my office. I'll bring it after the gig.
But I just think that this proves my point, that she's created energy in the state of Alaska and at UAF. And we're proud of her, and I'm especially proud of the fact that you beat him at his own game. So come on up, Gwen. Come on up.
Round of applause for Gwen Holman, everybody.
Yep. This is the North American electric grid. It represents the way that we produce, transmit, and distribute the electric power that we rely on for virtually every aspect for our modern way of life. It's one of the largest and most complex machines ever built by mankind. And it really is an engineering marvel. We don't think about it when we flip on the lights, flip the switch to turn on the lights in this auditorium, about whether that power is being produced here on campus by our local coal-fired combined heat and power plant, or if it's coming from the Delta Wind Farm, or coming up the intertie from perhaps the Bradley Lake hydroelectric project, or from a gas turbine somewhere in the Anchorage area, produced less than 1 second ago and coming hundreds of miles to light this auditorium. We don't think about it. We don't think about the fact that this power across the entire transmission network has to be perfectly balanced between power produced and power consumed at any second in time. That perfectly balances, perfectly matches all across this entire network. It just kind of happens. It's just sort of like magic, and we don't really think about it very often. It just happens. I didn't think about it very much either until I moved to Alaska about 25 years ago. I moved to Alaska with 2 goals. I wanted to be a dog musher, and I wanted to be a space physicist. Yes. I achieved one of those goals. So when I came to Alaska and I wanted to be a dog musher, I wanted to be a space physicist, I was a student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks at the Geophysical Institute, and I had a bunch of dogs. And even at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, they don't allow you to keep a sled dog team in the dorms. I don't know what the problem is, but they don't allow that. They should change those rules. But anyway, so I had to find a place to live, and I was working off of a graduate research stipend, which wasn't that much back in those days, still not today. And so I found this abandoned squatter's cabin in the woods on the outskirts of Fairbanks. My parents were super thrilled about this, by the way. This is all pre-cell phone, right? And so I moved into this cabin, and it was tiny, 10 foot by 10 foot square. I could touch the ceiling. I heated it with wood that I cut in the forest by myself. I had to walk a half a mile back to it. I had a root cellar that kept produce or, my milk or whatever, kept it cool in the summer and kept it from freezing in the winter months. I hauled water from the creek. I built a fire under a big 55-gallon drum cut in half that I put salmon in and rice in, and I cooked salmon for my dogs. And it was pretty simple. I had a little bit of propane for cooking, and I used an oil lamp for light. And again, this is, back in the dark ages before connectivity and cell phones and all these things. So once I was back there in my little paradise in the woods, I was pretty cut off. I could have lived 100 years ago. It could have been the exact same sort of lifestyle that I had then, and I loved it. But I had a day job, or actually in this case it was a night job, to be more precise. So I actually ran this laser system, this LiDAR system at Poker Flat Rocket Range. And so it was my job as the, kind of the graduate research assistant to go there and tune this laser. And so I got to spend a lot of quality time with this laser system. And this laser, what I would do is I would take this laser and shoot it something short of 62 miles up into the atmosphere. And I would bounce it off of ablated meteorite particles in the upper atmosphere. And I would use that as kind of a tracer to see how different kinds of natural phenomena like the aurora or gravity waves impacted the upper atmosphere. But I'd spend all night out there, and then I'd come back and I'd go to my little cabin in the woods and I'd read these technical papers by Oil Lamp, right? This laser, I calculated, could power 2,000 homes in the Fairbanks area. And yet I was living basically in, like 100 years ago, just with no energy basically available other than what I was producing and using myself. And so it really got me pretty obsessed with these energy questions and what it's like and how much we rely on cheap, affordable energy for the kinds of modern conveniences that we all take for granted for the most part in our society. And so I dropped out of graduate school and I decided to work in a much more applied space. And so what I did is I got into the energy field and I kind of changed my career direction. I had a mechanical engineering degree as well, and so I focused on that area. I lived off grid for 23 years here in Alaska, and our system became more and more sophisticated. We built more of a house instead of just living in a little squatter's cabin, and we had a diesel generator as the heart of our system, and then we incorporated solar, we incorporated wind power, we had a battery bank and a kind of a control system that managed all of those different energy sources, and at different times of the year, we could take advantage of different things. These kids are my awesome self-made solar tracking system. So whenever they're playing outside in the yard, we just have them, we trained them really well to just turn the solar panels a little bit whenever they walked by. So they would do that. And it worked pretty well, but it was expensive and complicated. And we always thought it would be so great to hook up to the electric grid, but we live beyond the edge of that grid front. There was no grid where we live. We were beyond the edge of that grid front, and that's what Alaska is. A lot of Alaska is beyond the edge of that grid front. It's a lot like this community. This is one of many communities in Alaska, remote, very few roads, very sparsely populated, and no electric grid connecting these communities. No electric grid connecting communities to one another, nothing connecting Alaskan grids to Canada or the lower 48, which means that production needs to be locally sourced, and it's often reliant on diesel fuel, just like it was at my house. But where you have local resources available, you can go ahead and incorporate those. My clicker is not working. It's me. It's a technology problem. So anyway, this is, I know, exactly. I have a laser here too. I can use it right now. There you go. So this is a map showing the edge of that grid front. This is it here in Russia. Here's in North America. And that's where the edge of that North America grid, at least in North America, extends. Beyond that, you have some regional grids, which are these dark gray areas. This is the rail belt grid that we're currently part of here in Fairbanks and Anchorage and extending down onto the Kenai Peninsula. But each single one of these red dots here represents an off-grid community that's not electrically connected to maybe more than its next door neighbor community at most. And so there's a lot of places in the circumpolar Arctic that are faced with these kinds of challenges. And in fact, globally, there's probably about 500 million people that are served by some sort of diesel-based generation, some sort of version of our microgrids here in Alaska. One of the big challenges that is faced by these diesel-based systems is the fact that that fuel is often transported to Alaska along very, very long supply routes. And so from Alaska communities, you might look at the distance between Anchorage and Naknek. As the crow flies, maybe 300 miles, but if you're transporting that via here, that's like 850 miles or something like that. These are very long distances, and a very large proportion of the fuel actually is shipped in from outside of the state of Alaska and goes up the river system. We spoke to some utilities in Russia where they actually deploy the fuel for 2 years to get it into communities. They have to wait for ice roads, then they have to wait for rivers to melt and transport it via barge, and it's actually like a 2-year deployment supply chain in parts of Russia. So these are very complicated, and when you have those kinds of complex systems, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with those kinds. And there's often very, very high energy costs associated with that sort of long transport and that reliance on imported fuels. High cost, potential challenges related to those costs and things that can go wrong. And you're also very dependent on world energy prices. Often, in most places in the Arctic, for small communities, you're looking at 1 shipment a year that might come into those communities, and then you're storing those throughout the entire year in these storage tanks. So in Alaska, there's a lot of incentive because these communities like Teller that I showed earlier or St. Paul here experience extremely high energy costs. I think the average cost in rural Alaska is about 50 cents a kilowatt hour, which is well above the national average, And this is in places where levels of energy poverty or just poverty in general are very high. You know, the median income in a place like Teller might be $10,000 a year. You know, so we're not talking about a lot of disposable income, and the energy prices are high. So there's a lot of incentive to figure out how to incorporate local energy solutions, whatever those might be, whatever's available. So some of our communities are lucky enough to have local natural gas available. We have communities like Utqiagvik and Nuiqsut on the North Slope that have local fossil energy resources. But most of our communities have renewables available to them. And so one example is St. Paul, and they've been operating this system for 15 years where they reach 100% penetration level of wind energy, turn the diesel engine off entirely for this particular system when there's adequate wind resource. And they're doing that without a battery, which I think is really fascinating too. And so they're really pushing the envelope in terms of what's technologically possible in a place that's remote even by Alaska standards. This is in the Pribilof Islands. It's an island in the middle of the Bering Sea. The community of Kodiak, 10,000 residents, has sort of become a bit of a poster child here in Alaska. They made a decision back in 2007 that the community wanted to get to 95% renewable energy generation for the utility, their cooperative utility. And so they made this concerted effort to shift away from fossil fuel and look at how they could get to this 95% level. And so they incorporated wind energy. And those wind turbines are sitting at the very top, the very ridge of Kodiak. So when you come into the harbor there, that's like one of the very first things that you're going to see. And the community is very proud of that because they really view those turbines as sort of a bit of a like part of showing their energy independence. And so they're proud of being able to see those turbines in the harbor. And this community has surpassed its goal, both in terms of time it took to get there and actually the amount of renewables that they were able to incorporate. They're now 100% renewable. They use a combination of wind. They do have hydropower, storage hydropower, which is sort of a battery, so that they're lucky because not that many communities in Alaska have access to that. But then they use a battery system to balance that, an electric battery, electrochemical battery, and they also have flywheels that manage like really loads that have high inrush current in their grid, which in this case are electric cranes in our harbor. So they're figuring out ways to manage this entire grid system in ways that would probably make most utility managers in other markets pretty nervous. One other community that's doing some pretty innovative things is this group of communities in Southwest Alaska. They're part of the Chininik Wind Group, and the pictures here are from a community called Kungiganak specifically. And they're really looking at energy from a pretty holistic standpoint. It's not just from a matter of providing electric power, but the majority of energy used in these communities is needed for heating homes, space heating. And so they're taking a look at how they can use excess energy from the wind farm and using that in distributed thermal electric loads that are controllable centrally in ways that they can provide inexpensive heating for community buildings, especially for residential structures, while being able to maximize their displacement of fossil fuels at the power plant. So they're actually getting to where they can turn the diesel engines off, run off 100% wind power, and displace excess energy when they have more than enough wind into these thermal loads. These are just 3 examples of 70 communities in Alaska that have invested in and have worked on developing these sorts of unique kind of energy systems, these microgrid systems that incorporate high levels of renewables. And I gave 3 examples of wind energy, but in Alaska, we've incorporated whatever the local resources are. We have a number of hydropower, hydroelectric systems that we've developed in Alaska. Biomass is increasing, especially for heating in the state of Alaska. We have solar, there's a geothermal power plant that we have. Whatever the local energy sources are, that's what the community has the opportunity to incorporate and use for that local system. And that's what we're doing as much as possible and figuring out how we can make that work as seamlessly as possible with the goal of displacing as much imported fuel and taking advantage of whatever local resources the community has available. I've been talking about these remote communities, but actually Alaska is really just a network of a whole bunch of different microgrids, and some of them are linked together. We're here at the UAF campus right now, and we are within the UAF microgrid. And so we have our own combined heat and power plant here. It heats the campus, and it provides power to the campus under normal operating circumstances. But we're connected to our local electric utility, the Golden Valley Electric Association, a cooperative utility, and when required, we can pull power from that grid. The same thing with our local military bases here in the interior area. They also are microgrids that can connect and disconnect from the larger grid. Fairbanks itself, the entire Golden Valley grid, can isolate or island itself from Anchorage if that's necessary or if there's some sort of interruption in service. And this battery system, when it was installed about 10 years ago, was the largest battery system in the world. And this helps support that northern end of the intertie with these nested and interconnected microgrids that are part of Alaska's utility structure. So Alaska's in this weird position. We don't have a grid. We will probably never have a grid that covers our entire state. So we don't have any choice but to rely on these local microgrid-enabled solutions that incorporate renewable resources. And in some ways, it's not too dissimilar from Africa. You know, Africa didn't really develop landlines in terms of phones. They skipped straight to cell phones. When better technology came along that didn't require all this infrastructure, they were able to be quick adopters of that technology. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what's happened in Alaska. We don't have this other safety net to rely on. And so we're having to make do with the circumstances at hand, and that's causing us to innovate. We don't have a choice. We have to innovate. So when you look at where we need to go in the future with the grid, you know, here's a picture of the Earth at night, and you can see you'd be forgiven if you were looking at the Earth from space to think that the greatest population is where the lights are the brightest, right? That's where the people live, right? But, you know, that's not always the case. If you kind of rethink the shape of the continents more based on the proportion of population that are living in different places, it changes the equation pretty dramatically. And places like Alaska, it essentially disappears. It's not even there. We have less than 1 million people here in this state, you know? It's not even there. The whole Arctic, in fact, is sort of gone. But other places, you know, show up in different proportions. When you look at the way people are using energy, it changes once again, you know? Now all of a sudden, Alaska sure looks like it could go on a diet. In fact, I think that by some metrics, Alaska might be the place with the highest energy intensive use in the country with some of the highest energy intensity. And the reason is because we're an energy exporting state, and it takes a lot of energy to extract and export energy. And so Alaska's sort of in this interesting place because in some ways we're at the top of the pyramid in terms of how much energy we use, but at the same time, we have some of the highest energy costs. So we have a huge degree of incentive to transition to other kinds of energy sources. And all those people that, like Africa, where's Africa, right? It's basically gone. You know, people want to get to the kinds of lifestyle, the sorts of, you know, affluence that we've come to expect in the developed world. They want to get there. And how are they going to get there? They need to have access to affordable energy too. And where's that going to come from? This is the first central power station that was ever built by Edison in the late 1800s. It's in Manhattan, and it provided power to a few dozen customers. It's a coal-fired power plant. And it was the Edison Light Plant. And so this particular system, when it was developed, it was all about central generation, putting power out to customers at the other end of transmission lines. It was monodirectional. Now, today, things have changed quite a bit. I don't think Edison could have ever envisioned the way our power system looks today. It's become really democratized. All of a sudden, anyone can install some solar panels on their roof, right? Anyone can do that. It's not so hard. And now all of a sudden, we have this bidirectional flow of electrons, all over this grid, and it creates a lot of complexity in the system. And it makes things more difficult to manage, and people and utilities start to get nervous because we want, at the end of the day, reliable power more than anything else. You can ask the people in Puerto Rico about that, right? The power generation was mostly in the south. The population is mostly in the north, and they lost those transmission lines, and they're still struggling to get the lights on there. And when the lights go out, especially for long periods of time, like in Puerto Rico, these things that you don't think about don't work anymore. You go to the gas station, the gas pump doesn't work. The ATM machine doesn't work. Often your sewer, your water system stopped working. The pumps don't run anymore. This is a serious problem for all aspects of kind of the modern sort of way of life that we've come to expect. And so we need to make sure that we have reliable sources of power. So incorporating more renewables and looking at more distributed sources of power that we're mixing into the grid, but at the same time making sure those are reliable by having more centralized, more microgrids that overlap and connect. I think this is the way that we're going to reinvent the grid. I think my thing doesn't like me. All right, awesome. So Alaska, I've thought a lot about this. I'm so inspired by the people that work in this space every day to keep the lights on here. There's a lot of reasons why I think Alaska is an energy pioneer. It's partially because of demand. We have this niche market. It drives technology transitions. That's an important part of the ingredient. We need to figure out these solutions here. We also have great resources, all kinds of resources. We have a lot of space. We have the opportunity to develop these kinds of projects. We have a really decentralized energy market. There are over 100 utilities in the state of Alaska, and a vast majority of them are cooperatives that have a real incentive to do right by their members because they're member-owned. The community members own the energy system, and so they're thinking about heat. They're thinking about things other than just electric power generation. And finally, Alaskans, and particularly the first Alaskans, there's a real history of innovation here in the state, and maybe it's because of the difficult climate, the need to kind of rely on other people, but the first snowshoes were invented here, and sunglasses and kayaks and even fat bikes were invented in Alaska. So these are some of the people that are part of that system. These are some of the pioneers that I'm inspired by in my life that are making these things happen across the state. And so the next time I think that you flip on that light switch, think a little bit about where that power is coming from and think about these pioneers in Alaska. Our state motto is North to the Future, and I think that that's really accurate. So please think about what's happening here in Alaska and think about how Alaska is part of inventing the energy system of the future. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.
So I'd like to ask for one more round of applause for Gwen Holdman.
And Ethan.
Ethan? Where's
and
Ethan?
Mira.
There's Mira. Thank you very
and
much.
Clay.
Clay's up there.
And Chris.
I don't know where Chris went.
And Jim Johnson. And you. This would not happen without you. This is storytelling. And you were part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Me? Oh, I thought you meant me.
I did mean you, Nettie.
Yeah, and you too, Bill. So we have one more thing. So in case you guys didn't pick up on this, Bill's an engineer, I'm a physicist, and we wanted to kind of show that we're not as one-dimensional as we normally seem in our normal day-to-day life. And we brought arts. Yes, we did. We brought arts to you this evening. Arts, yeah. We brought song. We brought dance.
Poetry.
Poetry. He, tricked me into thinking he got an award, but whatever. So poetry. I'd like to do one more. What do you think?
Yes, I would too. And that will be thanking.
I don't know what that is.
Hold
Oh,
on.
okay, wait for it.
hold on.
Okay,
All right, so
that again. Okay, there. That's what we want. So please take a picture of this, note this down, use it as a hashtag.
does everybody know what a hashtag is? Okay, raise your hand if you don't know. Okay.
Okay, so he didn't know. That's why he's doing this.
Who knows how to use a hashtag? George? George
George.
does not know how to use a hashtag.
He asked me earlier if you email to the hashtag, and I'm like, oh, that's so cute. No. So you're going to post your pictures that you take in the next couple of days of the DOE UAF National Lab Days. And we want energy-related photos. When you post them on social media, please use the hashtag. I don't care if it's Facebook, Twitter, name one.
Instagram.
There we go. Look at that.
Snapchat. Okay.
I'm out. So
So
use this
is-
hashtag.
This is what we're asking. We are going to make a mosaic of tonight to commemorate the evening, okay? And we want you to take a picture of yourselves or anything that reminds you of energy, and we are going to make that into a mosaic, and we're going to post it on the ASAP website. And right now, we only have 3 pictures. Those are the pictures. If you do not do what we're asking,
Those will be the only
the
pictures
mosaic is going to be
in the
this.
mosaic. Right. Please help us.
So take some pictures of things that remind you of energy, of things that remind you of tonight, and put them on Facebook and write hashtag AK.
If you go to there you go.
AK National Lab Day. If you write that hashtag thing, it's going to be on the mosaic. This is going to be your art, and it's going to be something that we build together to commemorate tonight. So, who are we going to thank?
We are going to thank our sponsors.
Okay. Who are they?
Alaska Center for Energy and Power. Thank you very much for bringing us here. The Fairbanks North Star Borough. I'm cheating. I'm looking at the... And ONR is here, the Office of Naval Research. And, of course, UAF.
And thank you for making tonight what it was. We'll see you next time.
See you next year.